Hey everybody, welcome to Poduty in the news for Tuesday, June 16th, 2026. I got a great guest joining me today, Joe Eftihiou from Claricast. Joe, do you know what time it is?
It's showtime.
What time is it? What time is it? It's time for Poduty and the news. Poduty and the news. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. Poduty and the news. Poduty and the news. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage.
Oh, the only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. Joe Eftihiou from Claricast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Love that. Love that theme tune. You've even got
Well,
the
it's only
dancing.
8 a.m. It's 8 a.m.
dancing
where I'm
going
at
on.
right now, and
Yeah.
it's a little bit later for you, but that's a high energy song for 8 in the morning.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's just after lunch, so I'm ready for it.
Well, Joe, tell us a little bit about Claricast. I know I've been on your show before. You're super passionate about podcasting. You're all about the creativity, the creation. Really refining, the level of what a podcast can be through expert audio, expert recording. And tell us a little bit more about Claricast.
Yeah, sure. So we're a podcast production company. We do launches, relaunches, and production, and we help businesses use podcasting to get in front of their ideal clients and convert listeners into clients or guests into clients as well. Basically, just ensuring that they're actually getting results out of their podcast, and that it doesn't just devolve into just that kind of week to week, almost like a hobby, which a lot of business podcasts do end up doing. So yeah, we really focus on the high production values for video and audio, show notes writing, graphic design, you name it. And yeah, we just help businesses put together a leading podcast in their space, and then help use that podcast to get in front of their ideal buyers.
Yeah, it really is next level. It's really incredible what you're building and what you've built. I've seen some of your clients. I've seen some of your work. If you're a business looking to build a podcast specifically, check out Claricast. What's the domain name?
Claricast.com.
How
Nice and
easy is
easy.
that? Claricast.com. I'll have all of Joe's links in the show notes. They'll be down below, and there'll be what we call the crew page. Now that Joe's been on the show, he's going to be inducted into the Poduty and the crew. And all of Joe's links, all of his references, all the future shows, if Joe ever comes back on, they'll all be listed on this page where you can really connect with Joe, stay in contact, find out more about Claricast, and follow the journey. Joe, are you ready for our first story?
I'm ready.
Story number one, we're staying in New York, and this is a big announcement. Podcast Movement opens ticket sales and speaker submissions for New York 2026. And yes, this is a podcast conference. Yes, this is going to be happening in New York City, but there's also a live podcasting element happening here where they're going to be doing live recordings and live podcasts during the show. So Podcast Movement has announced that tickets are now on sale and speaker submissions are open for Podcast Movement New York 2026. The event takes place September 17th and 18th at Terminal 5 in Manhattan. The conference will feature sessions covering podcast creation, audience growth, monetization, production, distribution, video, community building, and business operations. Podcast Movement has also opened its call for speakers, with half of the final sessions selected through public voting and the other half chosen by a community selection committee. And this is really a lot of what we talk about in this theater is if you are going to get involved in live podcasting, live events, the best way to get started is to go where your audience is. And if you're doing a podcast about podcasting, or you just love podcasting in general, events like Podcast Movement, Podfest, those are built with your audience already there in one place. So if you're thinking about live events, live podcasting, go to where the people who do the thing that you do are. And that's one of the reasons I love this event. I love that they're also incorporating live podcasting into the show. Joe, what were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, this is really cool. And it's not a show that I've been able to attend before, but I go to the podcast show London. So, yeah, podcast movement in New York. It'd be awesome to go to that at some point. And I just get so much value out of going to the podcast show, which is a similar kind of setup. It's in London. It's got live podcast episodes being recorded. It's also got the networking side of things and the seminars, so you can learn about what's going on in the world of podcasting. So if you are a podcaster or if you work in the podcasting industry, there's something generally for both sides. I mean, I've done a bit of research on the podcast movement. But yeah, I've been about 4 times to the London one now, and it's just been so useful as a tool for networking and connecting with people and just getting the latest statistics of what's going on in the industry and information. And yeah, I just find it very valuable, and it's always a nice event each year.
Yeah, the networking and connections that you make through these types of events are incredible. You'll build lifelong friends. I'm sure people that you met at the first, podcast London, you're still talking to, you're still in contact with. And on top of that, you're also finding out what's possible. A lot of times podcasters live in their little bubbles, their little home studios. They're doing their recordings week after week after week. But when you go to an event like this and you meet new people, you sit in on sessions, you're learning what's possible. You're learning how to build on what you've already built and really take that to the next level.
Yeah, and it's gotten better every time for me. Like you say, you make lifelong friends. I've been about 4 times now to the London one, the podcast show, and the first time I went, it was kind of nerve-wracking. I didn't know how to make the best out of my time there. I was putting flyers everywhere and in the hope that it would grow my business, and it's just like I've realized now that that's not really all that valuable, and it's the conversations you have. And now when I go, I'm walking around looking at the stands and stuff and waiting for meetings that I booked, but then I'll just see people that I know there, and it's just become more of a community thing and just something to look forward to.
Yeah, you can pass out 500 flyers, but they will not be as valuable as shaking 10 hands and having 10 conversations. You'll get so much more doing that one-on-one networking, and a little bit of a lesson learned from your first one, but you've built on that. You've now gone 3 more times, and you've made connections. In each and every one, it's really the benefit of going to locations where people are doing what you do, doing what you love, and you're putting all those people in a room. That's the real value of conferences like this.
Yeah, definitely. And I like what Podcast Movement does with the price. It's, you said $199, and that's just gets you access to everything. It's a little bit more segmented with a lot of these trade shows, including the podcast show London, where you get a bronze or silver, gold and platinum pass. And the first couple of times I thought I'd save a bit of money, I don't need to go to every single event, but then you find one that you really want to go in, it's like, okay, platinum only, you're not allowed in. So I quite like it that this one, you just pay and you get everything, avoids any kind of missing out or wondering which ticket to get and so on.
Yeah, no tier tickets, flat rate $199. It's just a great. I mean, everyone gets everything. When you go there, why not get the full experience? You don't have to really separate people off into private rooms. You can really have. Podcasting is so tight knit. It's such a community of passionate people. Everybody should really be involved in all the conversations. In our next couple stories, I know that you have a little bit of a music background, and music is probably the reason why you're so dedicated to great podcast audio. And this one is a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is hosting a live podcast recording with Sheila E. and Kathleen Hanna on June 24th. This event features Kathleen and Grammy-winning percussionist and singer-songwriter Sheila E. The recording takes place at 3:30 p.m. in the Foster Theater inside the museum. Tickets are $20 for members, $25 for non-members. And this event is one of several live podcasts hosted by the museum during the month of June.
Yeah, no, this is cool. And like you say, I've got a music background. I did music tech in uni, and then that led me to working in recording studios across the UK. And then I started moving into podcast audio, which evolved into all the other elements of podcasting that are now part of it, so the video and writing and everything. So it's cool to see that there are music podcasts and they're becoming more than just what they are at the moment. I feel like there were a lot of music podcasts when podcasting first started where they would just play music on the podcast, and obviously these days it's much harder to get away with doing that, but this is obviously an official event with the actual artists there and everything, so it's a nice way of bringing music into podcasting.
Yeah, great way tying it in with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We got Kathleen from Bikini Kill and La Tigra. Sheila E. has been just a sensation for 30, 40 years now. And what a great event, a live event happening at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, being recorded as a podcast. I didn't mention the name. It's the Music Makes Us podcast. They're going to be recording this live for later distribution. So you can be there in the audience, get the full real-time experience, but then fans can also listen to it at a later date, on their own time. And that's really the beauty of what live podcasting offers. It gives you an immersive, in the moment experience, but it's also recorded and lives on, much longer than the 2-hour session.
Yeah, and it gives it something a little bit different than what a lot of podcasts are doing. It gives you a reason to listen to that podcast above, or sort of instead of other podcasts which might be doing kind of the similar kind of things, just sort of talking about music. But yeah, it's quite hard these days to find a particular niche that hasn't been tapped into. They obviously have a little bit of a benefit of getting access to these famous artists, which is also going to help.
Yeah, the thing that I love about this style too is I think back 25, 30 years ago when a cover of, or a copy of Rolling Stone would show up in the mail, or Spin magazine, and you would read these in-depth interviews, these articles, maybe from the road or about their new album. But now we don't really have magazine subscriptions anymore. We might read some blog posts or some news stories, but these types of interviews, and we're seeing it a lot. Like Billy Corgan is doing an interview show where he's interviewing these famous artists from like a tea shop, like a little theater in the back of a tea room. And these are those magazine interview articles we used to read 20 years ago. They're now performing them live, and you can go see them, in real time and see how the sausage is made. See the behind the scenes, get those stories, ask questions, interact. Sure, there's an audience Q&A at the end. If you're a fan of Kathleen or Sheila E., you can certainly get up, ask a question, and how cool was that? You didn't think that was even possible 30 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like reasonably priced as well, and it's something that you would remember long term rather than just listening to an episode of the podcast on Spotify. If you've been to see one live, then that's something you're presumably never going to forget.
Yeah, $20-$25. That's a good night out in this economy. Let's keep it moving with some music. We're going to some hip hop. We got hip hop artists Fabulous, Mano, Dave East, and Jim Jones hosted the first live taping of their podcast, Let's Rap About It, at Terminal 5 in New York City. The sold-out event featured a live recording of the podcast, audience participation activities, music from DJs DJ Drewski and DJ Mike Medium, and a surprise appearance by rapper Remy Ma. During the show, the hosts discussed topics including sports, relationships, social media, and fatherhood. Audience members also participated in trivia games and prize giveaways. The event was presented by Prize Picks and included sponsorship support from 1800 Tequila, McDonald's, and Morgan & Morgan.
Yeah, it just, when you get that audience participation, it just changes it into something completely different, really. It is still a podcast. And talking about this a lot recently, like what is the definition of a podcast? Because there has been a lot of people that I've seen on places like Reddit claiming that if a podcast has video, it's not a podcast, and it has to be audio only. And then it kind of links in with this because it's no longer just audio. It's happening in a theatre. It's audio, it's video, it's live interaction, but it's still a podcast. You're attending a podcast recording, and yeah, it just transforms it into something completely different. Being able to access it's the access, isn't it? Being able to access the hosts, that you've kind of formed this kind of one-sided relationship. When listening to the podcast, it becomes, you got the chance to turn it into a two-sided relationship. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, like 5-6 years ago, I used to be one of those sticklers that it's got to be an MP3 file distributed by an RSS feed to a podcast app, or it's not a podcast. And I still think there should be an audio element and audio distribution to be in that game of podcasting.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I also am like, it has evolved to a point where I do think I'd rather support an independent artist creating something and not get hung up on the definition. So I still like, I want to see the RSS feed, I want to see the MP3 file, but I'm also so bullish on people creating their own works, their own media, their own assets, that I'll bend and flex my my rigid definition just to support them, to be there for them. But I also, I do want to see that. I do want to see the MP3 file.
No, I do agree, and this maybe slight bit of a tangent, but it's. Yeah, I agree that there needs to be an RSS feed. It needs to be distributed. It needs to have those things that make it a podcast. And I have seen podcasts, or I've spoken with people who claim they have a podcast, and then all it is a playlist on YouTube. I agree. I don't personally call that a podcast. But I'm presuming this podcast, Let's Rap About It, is an audio podcast, and it also has this element of live to take, so that the audience can take their being fans of the podcast to the next level.
Yeah, that's the part I love. Like, they're pushing the boundaries of, how do you record a podcast? How do you capture that audio? How do you create an immersive experience and then release that as a podcast? And that's the field that I'm playing in. And that's where I really see things come to life with podcasting when you do it live, that you don't just get when you're recording in your home studio and releasing an MP3 file, hoping you get a review or a comment. When you're really there in the moment, when there's 40, 50 people in front of you, it's such a different game. It's such a different energy. There's nothing compares to it. And while you are having that live event isn't necessarily a podcast, but extracting that audio to distribute, that's what becomes the podcast. So you can have all these points. You can have, like Joe was saying, you're getting into video recording, or you've been video recording. But so video is also a part of podcasting. You can capture the recording in real time. And now you have this video asset that you can put on YouTube or distribute in different ways. But you still, at the heart, at its core, it's always centered around that audio file.
Yeah, and I'm glad podcast fans have something else now. I'll have other options, because not everyone listens to music, or most people listen to music to a degree, but maybe not like hugely into music as much as they might be hugely into podcasting. And music and other forms of media have always had those options where you can listen, you can buy the CDs, the merch, you can go and see the band live, you can take things to the next level. And it's taken a while for podcasting to really get that mainstream. I mean, I remember I did go and see a podcast live about 10 years ago. I think it was quite an unknown thing back then, going to see a podcast live, but now it's, as you know, becoming more of a expectation, particularly from the bigger shows.
Yeah, you're seeing it all especially with celebrities and actors and comedians who have a large following already. We're seeing them take their podcasts to theaters and arenas and doing great shows. So we know that this is happening. We know that the public is starting to consume this as a form of entertainment, as live entertainment. The problem is, what's the bridge between the home studio and Madison Square Garden or a big theater? There's no middle ground. So that's where I really think over the next 5 years, you're going to see small places pop up so the independent podcast creators can perform their shows live to kind of be that stepping stone to bigger and bigger theaters and arenas.
Yeah, and I don't change what we offer all the time just to follow the trends with Claricast, because a lot of what's most important with the podcast stays the same, I think. But it's definitely important to keep an eye out and keep an ear out for what is going on if live does become the thing that people want, especially in the AI age where people are craving events and things that can't be replicated by AI, basically, and this is one of them.
And here's another one, a TV show in the States here called Dance Moms. Two of the mothers of the kids on Dance Moms, they're also part of the show, part of the a reality television series. Christy Lucas-Syek and Kelly Hyland, known for their appearances on the reality television series Dance Moms, will bring their podcast Back to Barre to Portland, Oregon on July 17th. The live podcast will take place at the Albert Rose Theater. Tickets are listed at $54.25, and minors may attend when accompanied by an adult. Lucasak and Highland appeared on Dance Moms, which aired on Lifetime from 2011 through 2019, and followed young competitive dancers and their families under the direction of dance instructor Abby Lee Miller.
Well, this one is a bit more of a slightly pricier event, but I imagine that they can command those prices because of their status and being on TV and everything.
Yeah, you have that celebrity background. You can pull a bigger audience, and you kind of find the balance. I don't know the size of this theater, Albert Rose Theater. I'll put a little blurb up on the bottom corner of the seating capacity. But if you're, this is something to consider. Is when you can get to a level like this. Even the first show was $20, and maybe you sell a couple hundred tickets. Right? That's some good money for an independent podcaster to walk out of there, with some money in their pocket after hosting a live show. So as another form of monetization, not just reading host-read ads for, MeUndies or Sherry's Berries or Purple Mattress, there's other ways to monetize. And what we're seeing in these first few stories is, live is another avenue to bring in some immediate revenue for your podcast.
Yeah, and it does seem like, it's good to see that some of these celebrity hosted podcasts aren't just doing the same thing as everyone else. There's so many celebrity podcasts popping up where their agent or their producer or whatever has obviously said, right, you need a podcast, and then to just sort of get it together as quickly as possible and get them in front of their audience, they're often quite generic interview podcasts where they're just interviewing the same celebrities you see on every other celebrity podcast. So it's good to see one like this where they're doing something a little bit different, despite sort of coming from TV and having that audience where they probably could get away with just interviewing celebrities. But yeah, nice to see some different concepts out there, I think.
Yeah, speaking of different concepts, our last two stories are, I like stories that are in industries where I wouldn't expect to see a podcast. And the first one's in the hotel industry. In the HT360 Hospitality Leaders Forum will feature a live recording of the Hoteliers Voice podcast focused on the future of hospitality spaces. The discussion will examine how technology, digitalization, and staffing changes are influencing hotel design, operations, food and beverage areas, and public spaces. The session will be hosted by Ryan Haynes and Scott Turner of Auden Hospitality and will include guests Alessandra Leone, Paul Wells, and Prem Jethwa Odedra. Panelists will discuss topics including space planning, interior design, smart technology, operational efficiency, and guest experience within the hospitality business.
Yeah, so this seems like, I've hadn't even considered a hotelier podcast to be out there, but obviously that we've got podcasts at every single niche. But this is more in line with the kinds of clients we work with. We don't work in this particular space, but in terms of B2B. So it's interesting to see that we're also getting B2B podcasts making use of these live opportunities as well.
Yeah, it kind of ties into our first story. We were talking about live events. If you're a podcaster, go to where podcasters hang out. And if you're in the hotel industry, maybe you have a hotel podcast, a hotel blog. Here is a place where all the people in the hotel industry are getting together to talk and share ideas. So if you want to present to be a speaker, maybe you can run your podcast live on the show. Maybe you can make those connections. You have something to build off of. You have a place to go that's in your area of interest. It's in your area of expertise. Why not show up at conferences like this that that are doing the thing that you love doing.
Yeah, and when you get into those niches as well, oftentimes I imagine that they would be one of the only ones doing that. So if you go to a convention in a very niche industry, you're likely not to find more than one podcast there. So it immediately makes you stand out if you can get involved with that as, you know, as the only podcaster in the space.
Yeah, and that really ties in to our last story, which this one blew my mind. This is the multifamily industry, which is like people who rent houses that are more than one residence per house. I think is what the multifamily is. This is a whole industry that is putting on Podcast Palooza. They have podcasters talking about multifamily industry. This is a whole thing. It's happening today, actually, in New Orleans, and the 365 Connect has announced its participation as venue sponsor for Podcast Palooza, a live media event taking place June 16th at the Civic Theater in New Orleans. Produced by the Multifamily Media Network, the event brings together professionals from the multifamily housing industry for discussions, networking, and live content. The Civic Theater, originally opened in 1906, serves as the event venue. Carrie W. Kirby, founder and CEO of 365 Connect, is scheduled to open the event, while Kirby and Multifamily Media Network CEO Mike Brewer will close the program with a discussion focused on industry trends and technology.
Yeah, no, that is quite incredible. If they've put on an entire event just for that niche industry, and it's centered around podcasting.
Yeah, when it was the naming kind of threw me off at first. I was like, "Oh, Podcast Palooza! Like, I should be there. Like, I love podcasting. I want to learn more about it." But then, as I dug into this is just podcasts in one particular industry, which it's so well done. The website's done really well. The event's happening tonight. We'll maybe get an update on next week's show. But I was blown away. Like, we say file these stories under industries I never expected to have a podcast. Well, here's an industry having a whole event about podcasts from within that industry.
Yeah, it's incredible, and they've obviously made use of this opportunity to get in front of a lot more people within this niche market, because I feel like a lot of business owners, or businesses that start a podcast, they expect to be able to put the podcast out there, and if they keep putting episodes out there, then eventually all their potential new leads will come flocking, or it'll create all these networking opportunities. But it generally requires intention, whether that's doing things online, so guesting on other podcasts and getting in front of other people's audiences on blogs and things like that, or these guys have obviously taken it one step further and put on a whole live event.
Yeah, love it. Very impressed. I couldn't believe it. The more I learned about the story, the more I dug into it. I was blown away that this even exists. What a thing to pull off, and that they're pulling it off at this level within this one particular industry. I didn't even know multifamily housing wasn't its own industry. I would just called it real estate or renters.
Yeah.
Or so the fact that it's a segment within a segment it blew my mind that they're pulling an event off at this level.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting.
Well, Joe, it goes by so fast. I had so much fun. We learned a ton of stuff today. We learned about Claricast. And one thing I do before we say goodbye is I turn the floor over to you one last time. Plug, promote, talk about anything you'd like. Joe, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much, Jeff. Yeah, so I would say if you want to learn any more about how to turn your podcast into a podcast that gets the attention of the people that you want it to get the attention of, and actually turns into goals. So whether that's finding sponsors to sponsor you, whether that's building a podcast that generates leads for you. If you ever listen to Podcasting Amplified, because you already listen to a podcast, so you just go on your favorite podcast platform, Podcasting Amplified, where they're mostly solo episodes, and I go into a different aspect of podcasting each episode. So practical things like how to write show notes that get people to click, and titles, and how to get the best audio quality possible, to more interesting topics you might not hear on other podcasts. So I've just done one recently going into the challenges that podcasters are facing these days when relying on AI to build a podcast for them. So there's a recent episode on that, which was good fun writing. So yeah, Podcasting Amplified, if you want to learn more about that.
Awesome. I'll have all the links, Podcasting Amplified, Claricast, in the show notes. Connect with Joe, follow along, see what he's building. Joe, do you remember what time it was?
It was showtime.
What time is it? What time is it?